200 years ago, this part of Northern California was settled by the Spanish. Into this so-called New World, the conquerors brought with them a philosophy of complete domination of man over nature, which in turn has led to a relationship with the earth that is not sustainable. We now realize we are living on the edge of a worldwide environmental disaster. From the thinning ozone to the melting glaciers, life on Earth is in peril. Welcome to Earth Wisdom for a World in Crisis. Mount Tamalpais, just north of San Francisco, has been a sacred site to the Ohlone and Miwok tribes for over 5,000 years. I've heard from my Native American friends that there is a small shrine here which honors the spirit of the earth and the tribes who lived here before the arrival of the white man. The shrine honors Sitting Bull, a visionary chief of the Dakota Sioux. Sitting Bull was admired for his eloquent speeches, defending his people and their profound love for their ancestral land. Inscribed in a plaque and set in stone is one of Sitting Bull's prophetic warnings.
Behold, my brothers, the spring has come. Every seed is awakened, and so has all animal life. It is through this mysterious power that we too have our being. Yet hear me, people, we have not to deal with another race. They claim this mother of ours, the earth, for their own and fence their neighbors away. They deface her with their buildings and their refuse. That nation is like a spring that overruns its banks and destroys all who are in its path.
Sitting Bull, 1877. Could have written it yesterday. Yes, we have overrun our banks, and it appears more and more likely that it is the indigenous people of the world who have been living for thousands of years in balance with nature that can give us important insights on the dilemma we are in. I feel the time is running out, and I'm not alone. I'm here in New York this week because the United Nations has invited almost 3,000 indigenous people from all over the world to come to New York City, the symbolic heart of the Western commercial world, to share their native insights and possible solutions to the global environmental crisis.
We have really done a lot of mess with our earth, and I think it's payback time. We are paying because of this. You see the tsunamis. You see, like in Kenya, sometimes there's mudslides, and you see we have earthquakes. So we are paying back for the destruction we have been doing to the earth.
On my first day in New York, I'm very curious. Is the UN actually ready to listen?
Aquí descubrimos también que este mundo moderno no tiene respuesta para muchas cosas. No tiene respuesta para la paz, para el desarrollo, porque está destruyendo la tierra, está destruyendo el medio ambiente. Y nosotros estamos avisando, estamos diciendo, está errado, no es así que se hace. Pero si no nos escuchan, ¿cómo vamos a transmitir esto?
Modernization is fine, but we should not lose out on our language, on our spiritual world. We should not lose out on our culture. Those are the reasons why we are here, to see whether we can find ways not to go back, but to see whether we can adapt them into the modern requirements. And that is not easy, but that is what we need to do.
Almost 3,000 indigenous people have traveled here at great effort and expense to make their recommendations on some of the major environmental issues of our time. Each representative has 3 minutes to make their case.
Nosotras las mujeres indígenas denunciamos las políticas públicas de deportación que causan la fragmentación de las familias y empujan al abandono de niños y jóvenes tanto en sus comunidades de origen como en las fronteras y en las áreas de dispersión urbana. La criminalización de los trabajadores indígenas ocurre a menudo debido a las políticas migratorias discriminatorias que no reconocen los derechos humanos básicos y las libertades fundamentales.
My message.
Christiana Seiti Lua is from the small El Molo tribe in northern Kenya. During a lunch break in Central Park, I wanted to know what she came all this way to say to the United Nations.
First of all, my major concern was to bring my people into the picture of the world so that we can be recognized as a people, both locally, regionally, and internationally, and put the El Molo people in the map of the world where they belong with the other tribes of the world. And the other thing is to ensure that we are included in processes on matters affecting us.
Is the United Nations helping you feel more visible?
Yes, that is in fact why we need to participate in the forum, because here we have a voice just like any other government, any other community. So here we feel we belong.
Belonging and being heard are key, not only to the El Molo, but to all indigenous peoples who have historically been marginalized and made invisible. Ironically, now in the midst of a growing environmental crisis, they are finally being recognized by the UN as having something to offer. The United Nations estimates that there are approximately 370 million indigenous peoples in the world. They represent about 90 to 95% of the human genetic diversity of our planet. Chief Oren Lyons of the Onondaga tribe in upstate New York opens the proceedings with a welcoming speech.
Now I ask all of our indigenous peoples from the four corners of the world to stand with me now and give you our profound thanks and appreciation for the adoption of the Declaration of the Indigenous Peoples, the rights of the indigenous peoples of the world. It represents 30 years of work, and so all of our indigenous people, raise your hands. And we give you our profound thanks and appreciation.
Chief Oren Lyons is a modern-day Sitting Bull. Oren is an inspirational tribal leader, an orator, as well as an historian. I'm interested in Oren's historical account of how the worldview of indigenous peoples first clashed with the worldview of their European colonizers.
In 1492, the Pope from Portugal issued a statement. And he said, to paraphrase the papal bull, we call them papal bulls, if there are no Christian nations in this new land that you find across such dark sea, then I declare the land to be open. Empty, terra nullius, empty land. Old Roman law. I declare the land to be empty and open to colonization by Christian nations. Further, if there are people there and they are not Christians, then they do not have a right of title to land. They have only the right of occupancy. So we're saying now to the Holy See, you have to do more than disavow or rescind this racist doctrine. You have to be proactive. You have to come forward and you have to confess to the American Indian people and all Native peoples in the world that you were wrong. Terrible injustice.
Oren's point underscores the historic shift in approach towards indigenous peoples, from outright extermination to marginalization to having a voice here at the UN to finally state their concerns.
Estos días hemos tenido al frente a nosotros un convenio de estados, el de cambio climático, en el cual nuestros pueblos no son parte, pero sí nos concierne y nos afecta este fenómeno, como han evidenciado las múltiples declaraciones de los pueblos indígenas aquí representados. Este tema debe ser materia de un seguimiento especializado, porque de por medio está la supervivencia de muchos pueblos indígenas en el mundo que están en peligro de ser desplazados de sus tierras y aguas ancestrales. Hay una ley, señora Presidenta, que no está contemplada en la Declaración de los Derechos de los Pueblos Indígenas, pero que sí, mi pueblo Collana Aymara la respeta, es la ley del Pachacuti, que quiere decir que la tierra está en una época de cura, de curarse, y esa cura de la tierra significa que la tierra debe descansar. Así como nosotros, siente, la tierra también quiere descansar. Le decimos, señora Presidenta, hagamos todos que la tierra descanse para que nos siga protegiendo en lo adelante. Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta.
Humanitarian organizations are trying their best to help. They often provide a bridge between indigenous peoples and their national governments. Brian Keene is an advocate for indigenous peoples and the co-founder of a non-profit organization called Land is Life, which helps to bring indigenous peoples to New York to speak at these UN meetings.
Traditionally, indigenous peoples are seen as obstacles to development and what we consider in the West, we consider progress. And it's really the opposite is true. Indigenous peoples have knowledge, they have ways of living that they've practiced for thousands of years, which aren't based on profit or competition, but are based on reciprocity with nature. And so when we hear these problems of global warming, of biodiversity loss, what indigenous peoples are saying is that if you really want to find solutions, you're going to have to work with us because we know the environment better than anybody else. And we have our own technologies and our own knowledge and wisdom as to how to adapt to these changes that are happening. If you look at a map of the world where there's biodiversity hotspots, where there's clean riverine systems, where there's old growth forests, that's all in areas where indigenous peoples have managed to maintain control of their lands. This meeting is very important for indigenous peoples. It's a forum where they can make recommendations to the world's governments and to the United Nations. We bring indigenous peoples from around the world to participate, and we put on a training every year before the forum begins. First, so that they can participate effectively in the forum, they know how it functions, and to really take advantage of their 2 weeks here in New York.
Can you expand a little bit on Land is Life? It's a provocative phrase. What does that mean to you and to the people you're working with?
It means exactly what it says. Land is life. Where without land, indigenous peoples will not survive. The land is the basis of their spiritual sustenance. It's where they get their medicines, their foods, their building materials. They have a connection with the land that goes back millennia, and that's our work, is to help them to be able to continue on as cultures with that knowledge. And the only way to do that is to really secure the rights to the land. When they are removed from their lands, they end up migrating into cities. And when they arrive in the cities, they live on the outskirts, they live in the slums, or they live in the street. And there are no opportunities available for them. They often don't speak the language of the dominant society. So they're forced into slave labor, prostitution. There's hunger, people die from hunger. When they're removed from their lands, that's the final death toll, pretty much, for a culture.
After decades of silence, some news channels are now covering indigenous peoples' struggles, such as that of the Aymara peoples of Bolivia, who are fighting for titles to their land.
Nosotros como pueblos indígenas originarios estamos marchando a defendiendo nuestros territorios ancestrales, nuestra autonomía indígena originaria.
También marcharon durante 5 días en protesta contra el sistema autonómico que sectores conservadores impulsan en el departamento de Santa Cruz. Los pueblos indígenas de Bolivia constituyen el 62% de la población según el Instituto Nacional de Estadística.
The struggle for land rights involves indigenous peoples everywhere, including the United States. During my week in New York, I decided to attend a Native American celebration held in Inwood Hill Park, the last patch of old-growth forest on Manhattan Island. An old friend of mine, Chief Jake Swamp, a member of the Wolf Clan of the Mohawk Nation, is being honored today for his environmental work. Jake is a spiritual leader as well as a man of action. he started a movement which became the Tree of Peace Society, which has generated the planting of millions of trees throughout the world. I am eager to show Jake something I discovered earlier that day in the park. This rock lies on the very spot where the Dutchman Peter Minuit supposedly purchased Manhattan Island from the local tribes for a handful of trinkets and beads worth about 60 Dutch guilders.
I really think it's a bad deal if it was illegal at all. I wonder if anybody's got the receipt. If nobody has a receipt for it, then maybe it's not illegal.
Can you get a refund?
I hope we can get it back.
Get it back. And we're told here that this little slice of land is the last 160 acres in Manhattan of natural growth forest. This is it.
Well, that's indicative of what's happening around the world. We're running out of resources and places where we can reach out and go back to ancient times to have a connection.
Gloria Ushikwa from the Ecuadorian Amazon has a direct, profound connection to the land. As a child, she was identified by her tribal elders as a shaman, a visionary. Gloria is well known throughout her territory and internationally for helping to halt the plundering of her people's land by foreign oil companies. Gloria Ushikwa is here to represent her people at the UN.
Bueno, mi papel es lo que ellos me nombraron para cuidar todo el territorio de la selva, para que no cortan nada, para que no entran otras personas que hagan daño. Eso es mi trabajo, lo que me entregaron ahora en mi pueblo. Abajo del agua estamos cuidando ahora. La parte que no pueden ingresar otras personas, que no pueden entrar y ese petróleo que son más malos del mundo, que yo no quiero, por eso es lo que estamos ahí. Voy a esperar un poquito más.
Many indigenous peoples see Gloria as an inspiring example of using shamanic powers against the environmentally destructive actions of outsiders.
Las otras personas ya quieren hacer otras cosas. Ellos quieren vender porque miran que son libres y nadie están viviendo, como somos pocos, somos parte arriba. Bueno, también hay una mala cosa, lo que yo hice algunas cosas malas para la gente, para otra gente que estaban entrando en mi territorio. Y para cuidar a ellos, toca meter otros espíritus un poquito malos. Meter aunque sea con algún serpiente, una cosa, y ellos quieren trabajar, y esos bichos tienes que molestar o morder para que tengan un poco miedo.
Can you tell us what spirits are in the earth? Can you describe them for us?
¿Cómo son los espíritus? Bueno, de la tierra es diferente del agua. La cara es muy diferente. Los ojos, los dientes son como puedo decir, algunos animales que de estos tiene hasta acá arriba, uno tiene para abajo, y ellos son de los plantas, esos son muy poderosos. Y esa planta tiene, así puedes mirar. Cuando ya tomas la planta puedes mirar así como hablando. Puedes hablar a esa persona, cualquier cosa ellos responden, pero van a responder muy verdad, va a pasar eso.
The worldview of indigenous peoples like Gloria's is often difficult for people in the industrialized world to fully understand. For centuries, the same has been true for the earth wisdom of the native peoples in the United States.
When I first started out going to universities, I we were kind of made fun of, the way we're talking about Mother Earth. They say, why don't you stop talking about old wives' tales and why don't you get yourself an education and be with it?
What was your response? What did you say to them?
Well, inside my stomach was just turning, but I can't show it. I have to take it because I know they don't know.
They asked me one time, well, what's your bottom line? What's your bottom line, Chief? I said, I don't know. They said, everybody's got a bottom line. Really? Gee, wait, let me think about this. I said, I don't know. Nobody ever asked me that question before. What's my bottom line? So I thought about it. I said, I gotta be careful with this answer. Serious question. Because bottom line indicates economy. Basically, it's an economic statement, Bottom line is profit or loss. After all, the figuring and the figures come to the bottom line. And I thought about it and I said, well, prior to them coming over here, we didn't have a bottom line. And I said, we don't have a bottom line. So I said, that's my answer. We don't have a bottom line. He says, well, everybody, no. I said, we live in a cycle. Spring, summer, fall, winter. Spring, summer, there's no bottom line.
Para nuestra cosmovisión, todo rota, todo es rotativo, da vueltas. Es como la Tierra da vueltas alrededor del Sol. Entonces, bajo ese concepto, hay momentos que la Tierra sufre y hay momentos que la Tierra florece, hay momentos que la Tierra descansa. Entonces, hemos pasado una época en que la Tierra se ha cansado de ser explotada, de ser saqueados sus recursos, de ser movidos sus montañas.
When people forget the original spirit or the teachings, what happens is we have a breakdown of society because the feeling we had with nature is normally feeling good. But when you divorce yourself from that feeling good feeling, then what happens is you start feeling sad and lonesome and you're craving to find that again.
Queremos que la gente y las compañías transnacionales entiendan esta cosmovisión. Porque si ellos no van a entender, nuestros grandes espíritus que son más poderosos que las compañías transnacionales les va a causar muchos castigos. Tenemos que respetar la naturaleza. El agua es sagrado porque viene del cielo, baja a la tierra y penetra las montañas y vuelve a salir por el mar y vuelve a subir y así nos da la vida. El ciclo natural para nosotros es sagrado. And this is the cycle, the sacred cycle of the water. We cannot interrupt this cycle.
So when you grow up with the idea that there's always a better place, always another place, and this place here suffers the consequence of that kind of thinking. And now, not only this place, but everybody, all humanity suffer the consequence of that thinking today. Now we're facing reality and the consequence of our disregarding the laws of the earth.
Entonces la sabiduría que nosotros tenemos tiene una base, no es solamente una base filosófica que viene de la naturaleza, que viene del medio ambiente. Esta fuerza podemos encontrar en los vientos, en la lluvia, en las piedras, en los ríos, los montes. Y eso no es una cosa solamente de conservación, preservación, pero de utilizar esa sabiduría, que aquí podemos llamar de ciencia, para mejorar la vida de todos.
Difficulties can escalate to conflict when the issue involves ownership of land. Here in Chiapas, Mexico, a confrontation erupts between native peoples and the Mexican government, which wants to extract oil and other natural resources from indigenous land. This tragic drama is being played out all over the world, though rarely like this, in the presence of a video camera, where the camera itself can affect the actual outcome. Native people all over the globe have decided that the fight for their lands can no longer be fought in isolation. Whether in front of video cameras or at the United Nations, they are expressing an urgent need to be heard. In a quiet hallway outside the UN chambers is an impressive exhibit by indigenous artists. I feel like I'm looking at images from a disappearing world. The theme is global warming and what's at stake for these caretakers of the earth. Images from the vanishing rainforest to the melting tundra and the plight of the reindeer herding Sami, one of Europe's few surviving indigenous groups.
We are divided by 4 borders: Norway, Sweden, Finland and Russia. And we have been there since as long as we can remember, prior to the Scandinavians and Russians arriving to that part of the world.
And what role do the reindeer play?
The reindeer herding is extremely important as a culture, a carrier of culture, because also in reindeer herding you have the very strong connection, the coupled connection, you know, between animal and nature and human being. It's a symbiosis in a way.
Is there any danger with the reindeer at this point?
Yeah, it's a huge problem because the snow is it's disappearing, and also it gets frozen in a way so the reindeer cannot access their food. And we had a huge disaster last year, and we have also had a disaster this year because a lot of reindeer just starve to death because they can't access the lichen anymore. So it is a growing problem.
Is it possible to still gain access to the old ways of the Sami?
Yeah, it's very connected still to the land also. We have old sacred sites, but now we've had quite a lot of trouble with tourism exploiting those sacred sites. And so we don't have any kind of protection to protect them from being violated by people. So it's deeply related to rights to land, actually.
Everything at the UN seems to move at glacial speed. Delegates are bogged down by rules and time limits. Their recommendations must refer to points in previous declarations. In this arena, seemingly small details, like the difference between people and peoples, can have major political implications.
Young indigenous people. It was a very long struggle to get the S onto indigenous people within the UN system. What does the S mean? Well, if you talk about indigenous people have rights, then it would be like, you know, individual indigenous people have rights. They have the right to a nationality, they can become president of their country, they can own a business, they have rights like everybody else. But what we're talking about when we put the S on the end is collective rights. Basically, indigenous people's rights is self-determination and collective ownership of lands, resources, and knowledge. They need to have collective ownership of their lands, because if it's divided up and given to individual indigenous people, then it can be bought and sold and divided, and little by little they will lose their land. If they have collective ownership of the land, that can't happen. Same with collective ownership of knowledge. You have ethnobotanists around the world in indigenous communities, often working for pharmaceutical companies, and they go to the healers and the shaman and they say, you know, we want to cure sick people, can you help us? And the shamans give freely of their knowledge because of course they want to help people. But what the shamans don't understand is that these companies that acquire the knowledge, they take the medicinal plants, they find the active properties of that plant, and then they patent them. And so now they're the owners of that medicine legally in the Western system. I think the latest estimate of the United Nations was that the value of medicines developed with indigenous knowledge is over $80 billion a year. And out of that $80 billion a year, indigenous peoples receive less than 1/1000th of 1%. So the shaman who gives the knowledge for the next wonder drug, he might get a tin roof on his hut, a tin roof that he doesn't need. He might get a motor for his canoe. He might get a soccer ball and a t-shirt or something like that.
Y advirtió de los efectos que esta medida trae.
Brian told me how some news channels in Latin America have finally become interested in the earth wisdom of their backwoods shamans and healers, now that huge sums of money are involved. Unfortunately, it's doubtful that the indigenous peoples themselves will ever share in the profits.
Patentes farmacéuticas.
Ahora, con haber flexibilizado, ¿no? Se está dando más potestad, ¿no?, a las transnacionales para que ellos puedan apropiarse propiedad intelectual que corresponden, que pertenecen a los pueblos indígenas.
Victor Kaisepo is from the Biak tribe of West Papua and reports on how Biak earth wisdom gets converted into intellectual property.
Kava is a plant that you can drink and that can relax your system. And when you relax, then you can get into communication with your ancestors. But on the island, people drink kava just to relax. But in this country, in the USA, they make it a pill out of it, and they call it kava. They patent it, and they earn them. And so sometimes indigenous peoples, with the technology, tend to not to protect them. And that's why here we are talking about intellectual property rights, to ensure that whatever is coming from our collective intellectual property, that if should there be any gain, then we would like to have part of that.
We, the Indigenous Youth of Australia, believe there is no one solution to these issues facing our communities, and we need and require a holistic approach from all levels of government, working in partnership with our communities.
The hope of many indigenous peoples who come to New York is that the UN, along with their own national delegates, will take their recommendations seriously and adjust their laws and policies.
But, sometimes the expectations are too high, and, the special rapporteur can only make reports. He cannot, really force the governments or the UN to do something. So this in fact leads me to say that despite the fact that for the last 7 years the permanent forum has been on, so many communities have made their recommendations and appealed to the UN, to the governments and all, but so far nothing has been done really. You see, it feels frustrating. We come talk. Sometimes I really fear if it is just going to be some empty rhetoric and nothing be done, but we still have hope that something will come out of this. Yeah.
Talking with Christiana in Central Park makes me wonder if all the long journeys, all the high hopes and heartfelt testimonials are actually making any difference. Are the government delegates really listening?
It's interesting to me, listening to the conversations of states responding to the indigenous discussions here. And the states are saying, yes, we're concerned about how you're faring and that your poverty, and we're going to try to help you, in this crisis of global warming, as if they were exempt, as if they were somehow going to be in another world. They don't seem to realize how democratic this event is going to be. You're going to see democracy at work here. There's no place to run. There's no place to go. And what you have is one earth. If you don't take care of that, you suffer the consequence.
Let me put it this way. If I want to build a canoe, I just need one tree. I wonder why 10,000 hectares of forest need to be cleared. So where are these other canoes being built? Now this is the way of life that we have in our relationship with the land, with the sea, with the rivers, and all the living spaces in there. The forest, so to speak, is our grocery store. That's where we get our medicinal plants. That's where our ancestors are living. That's where we buried our death. So it's much more than just protecting a tree. And that's why sometimes the mainstream society will not recognize us as a contribution to protect the area. If we say protected areas, we already protected by principle because our survival depends on well-being of the forest.
Just 50 years ago, 58 years ago, 1950, there were 2.5 billion people in the world. 58 years later, we got 6.7 billion. That's not sustainable. That's way out of balance. We're eating the very surface of the earth. We're displacing animals, we're displacing birds, habitat. The elephants are in a very narrow corridor. You can count the tigers, you can count the gorillas. We've polluted the whole ocean. Those are big systems. Once you do that to the system, you're not about to fix it. There's nothing fixable there. If you just envision 6.7 billion human heads all functioning and all thinking that everything revolves in my head around me. That's your ego. And if you step back and look at them as a species and say, that's a problem. The whole universe is in balance. It's always in the process of balancing itself. It's a work in progress.
Do human beings and nature mirror each other?
We are nature. We're not separate from it. You see, the question separates us from no. We are nature. That's us. Nature is us. Was that Pogo said that?
Yes, one of our great philosophers.
Well, that's an interesting observation, though. He said, I have seen the enemy, and the enemy is us.
Yes, indeed. Too often the enemy is us. Once again, I'm hearing echoes of Sitting Bull when he spoke about the white man.
They claim this mother of ours, the earth, for their own and fence their neighbors away. They deface her with their buildings and their refuse.
All this makes me wonder just where we went wrong.
It lifts the spirit of the people when they dance, especially the drum. That's what it's for. It's the heartbeat of Mother Earth, It goes in relationship with the earth and its rhythm. And so when the drum is sung, it's just like the earth singing. And the people are showing how happy they are to be part of this beautiful nature.
We're going to do a short Thanksgiving address. Number one, the Creator, the one that's in every living thing, including the trees. Everything that lives in its total is what we call Creator power. That's the one that made the universe where we live. And so we say thank you to our Creator for allowing us a safe journey to share each other's company. And we say, Creator, thank you with love, and our mind is agreed.
What's the importance of the Thanksgiving prayer?
To uplift the minds of the people, because in our world we have many people who are suffering from grief caused by war, or maybe family breakdown, maybe the losses of children through drugs and alcohol abuse. We have many ways to describe what it feels like when you fall into this the clutches of grief.
This earth that you are standing on and sitting on her, that's the one the Creator said is going to be our Mother Earth. She is the mother of the trees, and she is the mother of the deers and the buffaloes, and she's the mother of the birds, and she's the mother of all people, of all nations. Mother Earth, we say thank you with love today, and our mind is agreed. Also, the Creator made the rivers and the waters, and that waters is not just water. That water has a living spirit in it. And so this water is moving all the time in the tides of the ocean, in the streams of the rivers and the creeks, and it is looking to find our villages and our community where we live, so it can quench our thirst every day. And so what I'm suggesting today is that all of us here gathered, that we put it in front of us on this beautiful lawn, many thank yous, layer upon layer, and we will throw some to the east, some to the north, some to the west, some to the south, until every pond, every river, every creek, every ocean has received our thank you, our greetings and our love for the quenching of our thirst today and yesterday. And so to the waters of the world, your human relatives with love says thank you today, and our mind is agreed.
Thank you, water. You're still flowing in your different directions. You did not stop, regardless of how sad I feel today. When I look at you, you're still flowing. I can say to myself, life is continuing, and I can feel better. I can feel better when I say thank you, birds, for singing your beautiful songs, to comfort my mind. Thank you, trees, for providing the shade in the hot summer months. And so there's many different ways you can use nature through the thanksgiving of nature to comfort your own heart, your own mind, so that you can go on in life without too much distractions and not falling into sadness all the time. Because we're really here on earth to be happy and to have fun.
Les Touaregs ont aujourd'hui à subir les effets de la mondialisation. Nous pensons que ce processus va conduire cette fois-ci à la disparition d'un mode de vie ancestral, adapté à l'environnement. Du cheptel, patrimoine des peuples nomades, est décimé. Des villages sont saccagés et brûlés.
I've been in New York all week at the UN, gathering of indigenous peoples around the world, and I thought for sure that the New York Times would have covered this, but there has been nothing, no coverage all week. And I've had a few conversations with people from indigenous countries and cultures, and they're as frustrated as I am. They have come halfway around the world, certain that the New York Times, greatest newspaper in the world, would have covered the story, and they're not. Apparently, the desk told one of the representatives at the UN that it wasn't a story.
Se viene aquí en Nueva York, la tierra no puede respirar, todo está cubierto. El espíritu, ¿dónde va a poner dónde va a descansar? ¿Y dónde va a hablar con las personas? No tiene lugar aquí. Nosotros, los pueblos indígenas, tenemos que ayudar a ese sistema a encontrar soluciones para toda la humanidad, no solamente para los indígenas. La ciencia moderna manda los satélites al cielo para escuchar alguna cosa diferente. Pero el espíritu de la tierra no tiene que ir allá para escuchar el corazón de la tierra. Puede usted estar sentado ahí y escuchar o sentir el viento, ¿no? Y escuchar el corazón de la tierra. Y por eso tenemos que transmitir esa información a los que no son indígenas. ¿Y cómo hacerlo? ¿Cómo hacerlo si no están preparados para escuchar?
When the delegates return to adopt the final report, something appears to be going very wrong. Frustrations are boiling over. The UN security police are called in to quell the disturbance.
Most indigenous peoples here are not in agreement with some of the recommendations that the forum made concerning climate change, specifically with regard to carbon trading schemes. So they're trying to get 2 paragraphs taken out of the final recommendations.
They want to speak for 3 minutes, and I think it's right to give them the 3 minutes. Don't take to the principle. Just give them the moment to speak.
Time seems to be running out for the conference. To keep the peace, Madam Chair agrees to bend the rules, and the speech is allowed. It's a small but important victory.
Sí, ok. Bueno, acá mismo. Silencio, por favor. Base.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. A nombre del Caucus Indígena, queremos manifestar nuestras preocupaciones acerca de las recomendaciones adoptadas relacionadas al tema central del 7º periodo de sesiones del Foro Permanente sobre las cuestiones indígenas. Los pueblos indígenas reiteramos que somos titulares de nuestros territorios. Asimismo, somos dueños de nuestros conocimientos, innovaciones y prácticas, y rechazamos las nuevas políticas de los gobiernos actuales de explotación de las culturas, bosques, aguas y biodiversidad que hemos preservado y conservado en beneficio de la humanidad.
Cuando llegamos aquí, tenemos 3 minutos dentro del foro permanente para hablar sobre una historia de por lo menos de 500 años. ¿Y cómo es posible escuchar nuestra preocupación en 3 minutos? ¿Y cómo podemos también transmitir nuestra preocupación en 3 minutos? Es imposible.
No recoge las propuestas y preocupaciones de los pueblos indígenas con respecto a las iniciativas de reducción de emisiones por deforestación en países de desarrollo conocido como REDD, mecanismos de desarrollo limpio y el mercado de carbono. También nos preocupa que las iniciativas de mecanismos de desarrollo limpio sean considerados como ejemplos de buenas prácticas. Por tanto, reafirmamos la solicitud de la eliminación total de los párrafos 5 y 37 del documento arriba mencionado. Por último, solicitamos a la presidenta, que conste en el acta y anexe en el informe nuestra declaración y posición. Gracias, señora presidenta.
A powerful climax to an amazing week. The Indigenous Caucus seems hopeful that their concerns will be implemented.
Before any action is taken, you usually have to get it on paper in the Occidental world, right? So before there's action on respecting indigenous people's rights, you need countries to recognize those rights in constitutions and in national laws. It's one struggle to get it on paper, and then the next step is to get it acted upon, and that's the harder part.
The diligent record-keeping of the UN is truly impressive. Every word and recommendation is recorded and published in 6 languages, The transcripts are available to anyone with the time and the interest to read them. But what do all the reports amount to anyway? Will any real and constructive change come out of these hearings? And how about the earth wisdom of these proud and passionate people that we heard from this week? Are we and our leaders open to receive it? How can this documentary that we've made actually make a difference?
Here in United Nations is a close, but in your media we can speak to all the humanity. That's for us. I told you thank you very much for this opportunity, and this is very important for us.
It feels good because at least we have achieved something so far. To bring our community to be known, to be heard, to be seen. That's a step. It's a big, big step from all the way, halfway across the world, yeah.
I think culturally, spiritually, we are called upon to contribute to safeguard this planet, and I love the idea that it's been brought together.
H.G. Wells once said, "History is a race between education and catastrophe." It makes me wonder if we've had enough time to educate ourselves before it's too late. Back home, I feel the need to return to the Sitting Bull Shrine to reflect on all that's been expressed during this past week. And I'm wondering, is anyone listening? I'm still hearing all of their voices.
We're at a tipping point. In the time of the earth itself, we're beyond the millisecond, we're beyond all of that. The time is here, it's now.
I believe indigenous peoples can contribute to mankind if mankind is open to receive. If not, we cannot contribute.
Los espíritus siempre están atrás. Atrás de ellos tienes que decir sí o no. El secreto tienes que entrar a la cabeza.
As I listen for some message from the great orator-in-chief, I hear instead the words of Sitting Bull's modern counterpart, Chief Oren Lyons.
You're in a lot of trouble. Wake up, America. Wake up, world. And then you ask an Indian, can you fix it?